Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Marks. I'm the Chief Administrative Judge of the New York State Courts, and it's my great pleasure to welcome everyone to the National Summit on Human Trafficking in the State Courts. So we have a fascinating and important 2 days ahead of us. As you can see from the program agenda this morning, we have some introductory speakers, and then followed by 3 outstanding panel discussions. And then during the lunch program, we'll have several presentations, and then following lunch this afternoon, we'll have 2 more panel discussions. All of today's presentations will take place here in this room, and then tomorrow morning, the program will take a more interactive form when each of the state teams, and I would note that we have 46 states represented here, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories. So, you know, that's... It's really a remarkable turnout, and it's a testament to the great interest across the country in this compelling issue. So, tomorrow, each of the teams will work through several exercises culminating in an individual detailed action plan for each jurisdiction. And we have separate rooms set aside where the state teams will convene tomorrow and do their work tomorrow morning. I also want to mention tonight's cocktail reception, which is from 6 to 8, and that will be at Cipriani 25, which is a terrific new venue. It's just a few blocks down the road from here. And we really hope that everyone will be able to attend it and make it over to the reception this evening. So please make sure, if you haven't already, that you RSVP for the reception. And you can do that online at events@nycourts.gov. That's events@nycourts.gov. Or you can just sign up at the registration table outside the room here. So we really look forward to seeing everyone at the reception tonight. I also want to mention that, you know, if you have the time, if you're able to stay in town a few more days, that early October is maybe the best time of the year to be in New York City. There's a lot going on, and you'll find some information about that in the materials that you received today, eating, shopping, and other opportunities and things to do. So I would, if you can stick around, it would be a great thing. As you may know, this conference, and I think you do know, this conference is principally being paid for from an extremely generous grant from the State Justice Institute. And we have several SJI board members and officials here at the conference with us. So we're very grateful to SJI for its generosity. We would not be here without them, so please, let's have a round of applause for SJI. And also, we've received some donations from a number of law firms and other organizations, and you'll see them listed in the materials in your packet. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker. And by the way, all of the introductions will be relatively brief because you'll see in the folder we provided detailed written bios on all the speakers and presenters. You'll see that in the packet. But we're very fortunate to have with us today the Honorable Tim Hanna. Judge Hanna is the current chair of the board of the State Justice Institute. He's a former Chief Justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court, a former president of the Conference of Chief Justices, another one of our sponsors today, and a former chair of the board of the National Center for State Courts, which is also one of our sponsors. So Judge Hanna.
Well, good morning. I've listened to all those formers. I guess that means I'm pretty old. But on behalf of the State Justice Institute Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you all to this very important summit. on human trafficking in state courts, and I can't help but also observe how many friends that I've met over the years that are here, and how great it was to see and rekindle that friendship, and I look forward to in the next few days as well, which is also an important part, as you all know, of any summit that we have. You know, SJI provided grant funding to support this summit, and we're happy to partner with the New York Unified Court System and the key stakeholders on this critical issue. I can remember when Jonathan first started talking about this and just trying to hatch this out and thinking it through, and Jonathan, what a remarkable job carrying it through. And of course, you all obviously had a lot of help, but thank you so much. SJI was established by the Congress in 1984 to award grants to improve the quality of justice in the state courts and foster innovative solutions to common issues faced by all courts. SJI is supervised by a board of directors consisting of 11 members appointed by the President of the United States with the advice and consent of the Senate. Now, I went through that process. It's just like a federal district judge, but the last time I checked, we don't get the paycheck, do we, Marcia? That they get. But it was quite a process. And several board members are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge them if they would stand, and when I've got them all introduced, those that are here, if you would please acknowledge them. Dan Becker, State Court Administrator of Utah. He's our Vice Chairman. Chief Justice Chase Rogers from Connecticut. She's here somewhere. There she is. Okay. Justice David Brewer from the Oregon Supreme Court. Judge Wilfredo Martinez from Orlando, Florida. Marcia Roberto from Connecticut. I think Hernan Vera and Judge Gail Nakachal from Oregon, and John Nagelbaum from Kentucky, and Isabel Farmer are not here. She's from Ohio. They're also members of the SGI board, but they're not here today. If you would please recognize them. And I want to especially acknowledge Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman. He's also on our board, and I didn't forget you, Jonathan, who has done an excellent job of bringing us all here together today. If you would stand so we can recognize you. Now, he advised last night, J.D., that I had written a check for about $500,000 on the Arkansas accounts to sponsor this. I don't know okay, about that. Chief Judge Lippman has been a major force in moving us to think about what we, the state courts, can do to address human trafficking. And Chief Lippman, I want to commend you for your efforts and your unwavering dedication as always. Most federal and state laws on human trafficking have focused on law enforcement and prosecution with little attention on the impact of these laws on state court operations. The state courts are just now beginning to see human trafficking cases under new state laws, as all states have passed laws addressing this issue. Of even greater impact, it is now clear that of the juvenile and adult prostitutes who have contact with the state courts, many are trafficking victims. The state courts are becoming more aware that human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking, can manifest itself in a variety of court settings. However, courts are finding themselves without the knowledge, expertise, processes, and basic infrastructure needed to address the issue. In response to this national issue in fiscal year 2013, SGI designated human trafficking and the state courts as a priority investment area for grant funding. SJI also established the Human Trafficking and the State Courts Collaborative, consisting of the Center for Public Policy Studies, the Center for Court Improvement, the National Judicial College, National Association of Women Judges, Legal Momentum, and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. SJI remains committed to addressing human trafficking in the state courts, and this summit represents the culmination of several years of work on this issue. The agenda for the next day and a half includes the latest information on human trafficking from a judicial perspective and proven state court responses. And the board wants to say a special thank you for you. I think we have representatives, I heard 46 states, is that right? District of Columbia, and how many territories? Four territories. Absolutely amazing. It speaks volumes of your commitment to our judicial system and trying to deliver justice and to everybody, regardless of who they are in their station in life. And I also want to take just a minute. You wonder how some of these issues come up. Well, we encourage the board of SJI, if there's anything that's perking out there that is an issue that needs to be addressed, we encourage you to contact the courts. A lot of times the appellate courts are not aware of what's happening on the ground level at all. But if we get this information, we can look and see where the money could best be spent and get the biggest bang for the buck that we possibly can. So we're very interested in any input that you might have to SJI for such programs such as we are having here today. Again, thank you all for the commitment on this issue. And SJI looks forward to continuing to work with each state as we move forward in this issue and other issues in the future. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Judge Hanna, and thank you again to SJI. Next, it's truly a pleasure for me to introduce our host for this conference, New York's Chief Judge, the Honorable Jonathan Lippman, who will be giving our keynote address. Judge Lippman has had an extraordinary career in the New York court system, during which he has had an indelible impact on our courts in so many areas, including access to justice, indigent criminal defense, juvenile justice, to name just a few, and of course human trafficking. A man of great energy and vision, he is recognized throughout the nation for his many innovations and creative ideas and approaches to justice issues. And when he has an idea, there is no one better at figuring out how to make it happen. Someone recently described Judge Lippman as a force of nature. And I've worked closely with him for many years, and believe me when I say that is an apt description. So, Judge Lippman.
Good morning. Great to see you all here in New York. We've been in touch with the forces on high and provided some great weather. Tomorrow I'm not responsible for the weather. Today we ordered it. It's great, and we're so happy to have you here. Before I start my remarks, I did want to start by thanking the State Justice Institute, my dear friend Jim Hanna, Jonathan Mattiello, all the members of the board. As Judge Marks indicated, this event would not have been possible without the generosity of SJI, but more than that, its interest in the issues that matter to all of us in the state courts, and human trafficking, certainly one of the absolute priorities. I'm proud to be a member of the SJI and very, very proud to have New York as the host of this summit, and again, by way of the really wonderful sponsorship of the State Justice Institute. So I want to thank them. I also want to thank a number of people who are so responsible. The Human Trafficking in State Courts Collaborative, the Conference of Chief Justices. Mary McQueen sends her regards. She was unable to be here today. Conference of State Court Administrators, the New York State Bar Association, the Women's Bar Association of the State of New York, the Office of Court Administration. In particular, I want to thank A. Gail Prudenti, our former Chief Administrative Judge, for getting the ball rolling in terms of getting this conference operationally underway. She did a terrific job. And I want to particularly thank Chief Administrative Judge Lawrence Marks for really covering every detail to make this conference a success. Judge Marks has done a terrific job. You'll hear more from him as the day goes on and tomorrow. And thank you, Judge Marks, for all of your wonderful efforts. I also want to thank one particular person who really is more than anyone else responsible for this event taking place, and that is my mentor and just a legend in the New York. It's bad when you call somebody a legend, right? She is a legend in the New York State courts, the former presiding justice of the Appellate Division, First Department, the head of our Women in the Courts committee. Judge Ellerin told me that we were going to have a human trafficking summit in New York, and when Judge Ellerin tells me anything, I follow suit, and she is absolutely the reason why we're here. And Judge Ellerin, would you just... And I thank all of you for being here and a part of this event. I see so many, as Jim says, of our dear friends and colleagues from a lifetime in the courts, and I'm so pleased that we're here to engage on such an important topic. So, let's get down to business, dealing with this very critical issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking is at the same time a global phenomenon and an evil that we see in our own backyards. It encompasses the sex trafficking of young girls who are runaways from group homes and foster care, victims of domestic violence who are forced into selling themselves by an abusive boyfriend or partner, the enslavement of workers brought to the U.S. to rebuild after Hurricane Katrina, and many other forms of sex and labor trafficking. As defined in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, trafficking is the act of recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a person for compelled labor or commercial sex acts through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. Human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar industry and one that is growing rapidly. Among criminal enterprises, it is second only to drug trafficking in profitability. While it is difficult to measure precisely, a practice that exists largely in the shadows, the estimates we do have are staggering. Across the globe, there are over 20 million victims of human trafficking, 20 million. In the United States, about 80% of victims in sex trafficking incidents are U.S. citizens. The great majority of the victims of sex trafficking within the United States are women and children, particularly girls under 18 years of age. In the United States, the typical age of entry into prostitution is only 12 to 14 years old. For most of our history, trafficking victims have had an entirely negative place in our culture. They were thought of not as victims, but as criminals, addicts, delinquents, irredeemable, and profit-driven. While some may still feel that way, we have come a long way in our understanding of this complex problem. We have come to recognize that the vast majority of children and adults charged with prostitution offenses are commercially exploited or at great risk of exploitation. Prostitution is not a profession of choice, period. All too often, we are talking of victims of intimate partner violence, individuals who are unable to extricate themselves and in need of protection from their abusers. These individuals may be runaways, easy prey to traffickers, or be in the grip of an addiction that has led to their exploitation. I have no doubt that many of you have seen the devastation that human trafficking has wrought on the faces of those who have come through your courthouse doors. Specifically, many sex trafficking victims end up in court as defendants charged with prostitution-related offenses because they have been induced, misled, or forced into illegal conduct. However, not many of their clients are arrested, and even fewer of their traffickers or those who have led them into prostitution are ever charged. Those induced into prostitution may hesitate to reveal their victimization out of fear or mistrust, and in the past, so many victims have passed through our criminal justice system without ever being identified as victims of trafficking. The problem of human trafficking is sobering and gut-wrenching. It is a form of modern-day slavery, and it is a travesty that in the year 2015, there are people who live their lives in absolute fear as they face life-threatening beatings, who are bought, sold, and traded like merchandise, and who are sold for sex anywhere from 10 to 30 times per day. Here in New York, we saw the need for a new approach. It simply did not make sense to treat those arrested for prostitution-related offense like criminals when they often engaged in behavior that was against their will, and when they were lured unsuspectingly and trapped in the industry from a young age. Now, instead of approving pleas where trafficking victims spend a few days in jail and are soon released back into the arms of their pimps, abusers, and victimizers, we have pioneered a method to identify trafficking victims, refer them to services, and restore them to law-abiding lives. By connecting trafficking victims to vital counseling, mental health services, drug treatment, housing options, job training, immigration services, and other resources, we give them the tools that will help them break away from their former life and look forward to a brighter future. The Human Trafficking Intervention Court model in New York is truly a community court that necessitates the cooperation of many of our justice partners. The district attorney's office, defense attorneys, and service providers who provide the essential resources are all critical players in our human trafficking courts. While the Trafficking Intervention Court model was initiated by the courts, it took the vital input and participation from other parties in order to ensure the court's effectiveness in reaching victims of trafficking. Additionally, we provided critical training on trafficking to our judiciary and court staff across the board. We convened day-long training programs for judges and their staff from the Human Trafficking Intervention Courts that covered legal topics, best practices from experienced judges, and cultural competency and skills. We also worked with the Center for Court Innovation, the National Judicial College, and the State Justice Institute to implement broader training to ensure that our judiciary has a deep understanding of the enormously complicated issues facing victims. After the success of this model was demonstrated at 3 different pilot sites, the New York State courts implemented human trafficking intervention courts across the state in urban, suburban, and rural locations, and reaching 95% of those charged with prostitution and trafficking-related offenses in our state. Our statewide system of courts spans from Long Island to Buffalo, intervening in the lives of trafficked human beings and opening the door for thousands of people to escape a life of brutality and abuse. The first step towards creating a change in our court system was recognizing that not all defendants are the same, and that oftentimes the real perpetrators of crimes are hidden from our view. The second step was acknowledging that we could do better than the status quo, and that we could change our methods and our protocols to provide more effective outcomes for victims of human trafficking as well as our communities. Each step required the initiative, courage, fortitude, and leadership of court administrators, judges, service providers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, resource coordinators, and others. The reason we have invited all of you to attend the National Summit for the next 2 days is because of your leadership role in your respective states. As leaders of the judiciary, of the executive branch, of state and local governments, we have a responsibility. We have the political capital and the ability to create effective change in our communities. We have the bully pulpit to spread the word on the issues that we prioritize, and we have leverage to build consensus on important matters and to create change. When a judge speaks, people listen, and we have the ability to act as a catalyst to get our partners in government to sit together at the same table. In order to do justice in our courts and to address this terrible scourge of modern society that is so prevalent in our country and around the globe, we need strong leadership on the issue of human trafficking. While the media has drawn attention to the problem of human trafficking, we have a unique opportunity to make significant progress towards eradicating it by connecting victims to services and putting them on a crucial escape path. It is not simply a matter of policy or practice. It is a moral imperative that we cannot ignore. Ignoring this problem in our courts is indirectly facilitating the business of the sellers of human flesh, who are evil to their very core. It is our job to pursue justice for the victims who have been exploited and violated beyond imagination each and every day. It is my hope that after we hear these tragic stories of individuals trapped in human trafficking rings, as well as the beautiful stories of redemption of people who found the resources they need to break free from their traffickers, that we can take action in our own states. I hope that we can learn from each other, that we can use this opportunity to share information on what has been successful and what has proven to be a challenge in this field. And we recognize that each state and locality is at a different stage of readiness. For some of you, exercising judicial leadership will translate into convening a task force or committee to examine the problem of human trafficking in your area and to consider some ways the state courts can address the problem. For others, judicial leadership may lead you to set up a specialized trafficking court to deal with victims with drug addictions, or to connect commercially sexually exploited youth to services, or to focus attention on the need to identify, investigate, and bring charges against the traffickers who operate and prey on the most vulnerable among us. In all these areas, there is still so much work to be done in each and every one of our jurisdictions. While New York provides one example of how human trafficking is addressed in our jurisdiction, the beauty of this national summit is that there are also many other judges and administrators who can share what is going on in their home states. I know from my time on the State Justice Institute board that we have heard great reports from Texas, California, Georgia, Illinois, Ohio, and other areas around the country. Responding to human trafficking in the state courts in a significant and strategic way is a priority investment area for SJI, and we are fortunate to have the ongoing work of the wonderful Human Trafficking in State Courts Collaborative, who will be very much involved in the summit, to provide support to states as they address trafficking in their courts. Already there have been so many amazing stories of trafficking survivors who have broken free from their exploiters and gone on to complete college, graduate school, and who have spoken before state legislatures and the UN about their experiences. It took courage and boldness for these individuals to extricate themselves from horrifying situations. And truly, if they can take the initiative to do something about human trafficking under the most extreme conditions, we must follow their lead. We must take action to address this heinous crime that exists in our communities and commit ourselves to getting the job done, laying the groundwork for eradicating human trafficking as we know it. Let us no longer turn a blind eye to this terrible crisis and make it our legacy that we stood up for basic human rights, shined a light on this most vulnerable of populations, and brought hope to the hopeless. Thank you so much. Thank you.